hello everyone. I'm very excited to be in this moment where we're launching the Financial Secrecy Index finally. I will share my screen. Yeah, all good. Okay, so let me take you through the index. So the Financial Secrecy Index is actually a great tool for understanding global financial secrecy and illicit financial flows. Now, as Alex mentioned before, at the Tax Justice Network, we publish it every 2 years since 2009, and this is already the 7th edition of it. And we started with assessing 60 jurisdictions, and every edition we try to increase the number of countries we assess. So for this 2022 edition, we already assess 141 jurisdictions. The index ranks jurisdiction based on how much financial secrecy they supply to the world. So a higher rank on the index does not necessarily mean that a country is more secretive. Rather, that a country plays a bigger role in enabling individuals and entities to hide and launder money. And the index, as you can see, has two components, one qualitative and one quantitative. So the secrecy score, which is the qualitative component, assesses how secretive the country's legal framework is. The quantitative component is the global scale weight, which is the country's share in the global financial services that are offered to non-residents. And the combination of these two components, according to a specific formula, leads to a secrecy value, according to which we rank the jurisdiction. Now, the reason why we take into account the global scale weight and not just rank them according to their legal framework is because we measure the risks of illicit financial flows. And it's clear that large financial centers with relatively moderate financial secrecy, like Luxembourg, for instance, they facilitate more illicit financial flows than small financial centers with high level of financial secrecy, like the Maldives. So that's where we see we can have more impact in changing and pushing those countries to change their rules. Now, in our view, the bigger financial center is, the more responsibility it has to be financially transparent. So, as Alex said, the index is not just a binary blacklist or whitelist of countries. It is rather a spectrum. We reflect it on a spectrum which all jurisdictions are scored according to the extent of the financial secrecy they supply. So the secrecy score component is comprised of arithmetic average of 20 secrecy indicators divided to 4 thematic areas. And they are all scored between 0 to 100. Among others, we look at ownership registration of legal vehicles like companies, trust, and so on. We look at information exchange, court secrecy, bank secrecy, and more. And we assess each one of the secrecy indicators according to the weakest link principle. And what does it mean? That the least transparent option available in the jurisdiction will be the one to determine the indicator secrecy score. So, for example, if a country has several types of companies, just one of which is not obliged to register its legal owners, most likely it will score badly on the specific indicator because we assume that those that want to abuse the system will choose exactly to incorporate that type of company. So we launched the index this morning, and this is kind of a taste of our recent media hits so far. So as you can see, it's kind of from many countries, many languages, and we hope it will increase in the next few days and bring more impact. And the results. So as you see here, the US now ranks first on the index. It has climbed to the top of the ranking by enabling the biggest supply of the financial secrecy ever recorded by the index. One of the most harmful factors behind the US position is actually refusal to reciprocally exchange information with other countries' tax authorities. Germany moved up from 14th, it was in 2020, and now it's ranked 7th after it increased its supply of financial secrecy by 36%. Singapore leapfrogged from the 5th it was to the 3rd place this time after it increased its supply of financial secrecy by 14%, while Hong Kong was slightly reduced. And the United Arab Emirates went up from the 10th to the 8th after increasing its supply of financial secrecy by 7%. Now, the United Kingdom is not here in the top 10. It's ranked 13 this year. But the UK, if we add the UK and its overseas territories and crown dependencies together, they actually supply just over 10% of the financial secrecy in the world, which is almost double the one of the United States supply. So some global observations from this edition. Overall, the global financial secrecy supplied by countries was reduced by 2%. So that really confirms that the transparency reform we are seeing in the last recent years are working. The reduction is primarily driven by two trends. First one is that more countries are adopting or improving beneficial ownership registration laws. And the second is that more countries, particularly lower income countries, improving international cooperation on anti-money laundering, on information and exchange, and judicial cooperation. So if we compare the jurisdiction performance on the ABC of transparency, as we call it, so A is for automatic information exchange, and B is for beneficial ownership, and C is for country by country reporting, we definitely see improvements there compared to the 2020 edition, and I will say some more about that in a minute. However, 5 of the G7 countries, namely the US, Germany, Japan, the UK, and Italy, have cut back that global progress by half. So these 5 countries collectively supply 1/8 of financial secrecy to the world. And when I say cut by half, it means that if we exclude the increase in financial secrecy of these countries, we find that global financial secrecy actually is reduced by 5% rather than 2%. If we slightly dive into the trends on our ABC of transparency, so with regards to automatic information exchange compared to the 2020 edition, 5 additional countries, basically Brunei, Kenya, Morocco, Maldives, and Peru, have joined the Common Reporting Standard, and they exchange bank account information automatically now. The second thing that worth mentioning is that after almost 5 years, we have been calling for countries to publish some statistic on the data they have been exchanging. 2 countries, Australia and Germany, are finally publishing statistics on an aggregate basis. And actually, just last week, Argentina joined these 2 countries and published this type of statistics as well. However, many low-income countries are still left out and are not able to join the multilateral convention for various reasons. So we still need to push for inclusivity here. And until that happens, it will surely help if more or even all countries that are already part to that convention will publish the statistics so that the data they can exchange can be used to by other countries that are not yet there to identify important trends. On beneficial ownership registration, compared with the 2020 edition, where we identified 80 countries that have beneficial ownership registration, this time around, we are already identifying 92 countries, and we expect this trend to continue to grow in light of the recent FATF reform of Recommendation 24. which requires beneficial ownership registration of legal persons to be made with an authority. Nonetheless, improvement is still required. So some of the laws have loopholes, and we detail them in our country profiles, as you can see on our website, and thus they are not likely to lead to the sufficient beneficial ownership registration as we would like them to. Second, the scope of many of the laws is limited, and often it covers only legal person, but not trust or limited partnerships. And the third thing we should say that many beneficial ownership registration are unfortunately not publicly available. On country by country reporting, is since 2020 edition, Switzerland joined the countries that require companies operating in the extractive sector to publish their country by country reports. So we have one more country at the moment. Also in 2021, there were 38 countries that have published statistic on their implementation of Action 13 of the OECD, which requires companies to report on country by country reporting, but this is not made public. So while these statistics, again, are anonymized and on an aggregate basis, they are still useful and they constitute a useful step forward. But still, there is no country in the world at the moment that requires public country by country for all sectors. So the available sectors are either extractives or the banking sector. So what can we do about this? Global asset registry. So anonymous wealth, as Alex mentioned, is inevitably lawless. And therefore, it's important that countries will set up global asset registry to deliver transparency of ownership and to allow laws and taxes to be made fair and effective around the world. Second, our recommendation, we have to push for the UN Tax Convention to set the standards in a globally inclusive way and to create an intergovernmental rule-setting body that can deliver the tax rule to end the global tax abuse and cost countries almost $500 billion in lost revenues every year. Now, we have the momentum, the momentum to move rulemaking to the global tax and finance to the UN was already triggered in 2020 by the UN FACTI panel, which recommended to establish a UN tax convention. And in 2021, it was the World Economic Forum that recommended it as a key policy pathway. And recently also the African Union discussed it. So we definitely have to push for that. And finally, our index is definitely not just a ranking. We have a brand new website that we really invite you all to have a look at it and to explore. We have methodology and research reports there available. We have a country profile for each of the countries we assess, very detailed with all the sub-indicators there, explanations, sources, and much more actually. So you're all welcome to visit there. And I'm happy to answer any question you may have. Thank you for listening.